Before the barbed wire and concrete, Korea was one nation, one language, one culture, one people. For centuries, dynasties like Goryeo and Joseon shaped a shared identity, from Seoul's palaces to Pyongyang's scholars. Today's division feels unnatural, an amputation, not an evolution. The longing for reunification endures on both sides. The echoes of unity still shape every hope for tomorrow. In 1910, Japan annexed Korea, ending centuries of self-rule and beginning a campaign to erase Korean identity. The Japanese forced Koreans to adopt their language, change their names, and bow to a foreign emperor. Land was seized, resources exploited, and millions conscripted for labor. Despite brutal repression, the Korean spirit of resistance endured. Underground newspapers, secret societies, and protests kept hope alive. The March 1st movement of 1919 saw hundreds of thousands demand independence. Japan's violent crackdown only deepened the resolve for freedom. Many activists, disillusioned with peaceful protest, turned to armed resistance abroad, including a young Kim Il-sung. The occupation left deep scars, a legacy of trauma, fierce nationalism, and wariness of foreign powers. When liberation came after World War II, it was granted by outsiders, not won by Koreans themselves. This fact would haunt the peninsula, setting the stage for a new, even more tragic division. The shadow of Japanese rule faded, but the wounds and lessons of occupation would shape Korea's destiny. The fight for freedom became the defining struggle for a generation, North and South. The next chapter would be written not by Koreans, but by the superpowers of a divided world. In 1945, Korea's fate is decided in Washington and Moscow, not Seoul or Pyongyang. The peninsula is split at the 38th parallel, Soviets in the north, Americans in the south. Families are divided, travel is cut off, and unity fades as Cold War tensions rise. The border, drawn by distant powers, becomes a fuse for future conflict. After the Korean War, Kim Il-sung rebuilt the North as a totalitarian state centered on his rule. He purged rivals, rewrote history, and created a cult of personality. His image omnipresent, his word law. To justify his power, Kim introduced yuja, self-reliance, an ideology that demanded loyalty and isolation from the outside world. Society was reorganized. The state controlled every aspect of life, and a rigid class system, songbun, determined one's fate. Privileges went to the loyal. Suspicion meant discrimination or worse. Yush became both shield and prison, teaching that sacrifice was necessary to protect the nation under the great leader. Even after his death in 1994, Kim Il-sung remained the eternal president. His cult passed to his son. North Korea became the world's first communist dynasty, ruled by fear, worship, and isolation. Kim Il-sung didn't just rule. He created a society in his own image, cut off from the world and trapped in time. The legacy of Yuki endures, shaping every aspect of North Korean life. The foundation was set for a dynasty that would outlast the man who built it. The world would soon witness the consequences. Kim Il-sung's death in 1994 brought his son, Kim Jong-il, to power, the world's first communist hereditary succession. Kim Jong-il inherited a nation in crisis. The Soviet collapse ended aid, and famine swept the land. The arduous march saw the public distribution system collapse. Hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, starved. As his people suffered, Kim poured resources into a nuclear weapons program, seeing it as the regime's ultimate insurance. In 2006, North Korea tested its first nuclear bomb, defying the world and triggering sanctions. The regime survived, but at a terrible cost: starvation, isolation, and fear. Kim Jong-il's rule was marked by paradox mass suffering alongside nuclear ambition. The cult of personality intensified, and power was maintained through propaganda and terror. When Kim Jong-il died in 2011, he left behind a more isolated and dangerous North Korea. The nuclear dawn secured the regime, but deepened the people's misery. The dynasty would continue, passing its dark legacy to a new, untested leader. North Korea's future was more uncertain and more perilous than ever. The world watched, anxious for what would come next. Kim Jong-un, barely in his late 20s, took power in 2011, young, untested, and ruthless. He swiftly purged rivals, even executing his own uncle, sending a message of absolute control. Kim crafted his image to echo his grandfather, Kim Il-sung, reviving nostalgia for a golden era. State propaganda portrayed him as both modern and formidable, a hands-on leader visiting factories and military units. Under Kim, North Korea's nuclear and missile programs accelerated. ICBMs, hydrogen bombs, and relentless tests. The Byungjin Line, parallel development of the economy and nuclear arsenal, became his signature policy. Nuclear weapons were not just for defense, but for prestige and leverage on the world stage. Kim's diplomacy has swung from threats of war to historic summits, but real change remains elusive. Kim Jong-un has proven shrewd and unpredictable, determined to secure his dynasty and North Korea's nuclear status. The cost to his people is immense, but the regime's grip is tighter than ever. The world faces a North Korea more dangerous and more isolated than before. The future remains uncertain, shaped by one family's iron will. The fate of millions hangs in the balance. For most North Koreans, life is a daily struggle under one of the world's most repressive regimes. Freedom of speech, press, and assembly are non-existent. All media is state-controlled propaganda. Criticizing the Kim family can mean imprisonment for entire families. 3 generations punished for one person's words. The official economy barely functions. Survival depends on black markets, the Jangmadang, where goods and information are traded. A small entrepreneurial class has emerged, but most live in poverty, facing food insecurity and deprivation. The regime fights to keep out foreign information, but USB drives and smuggled media offer glimpses of another world. For many, especially the young, these glimpses plant seeds of doubt about the regime's narrative. Change is nearly impossible. Surveillance is pervasive, neighbors spy on each other, and the military remains loyal. China prefers a stable North Korea to chaos, ensuring the regime's survival. The country remains locked in isolation, a prison the size of a nation. The legacy of division, war, and dictatorship endures, shaping every life within its borders. Yet the hope for change persists, fueled by memories of unity and dreams of freedom. The story of North Korea is not just one of tragedy, but of resilience and the possibility of a different future.